Hi! It's been 2 years since the last bus project update. I don't know what's wrong with me, but it doesn't matter now because I'm back and so is the bus. And by the end of this video, the bus will look like this. So stay tuned to see how I got here. You can't see me anymore. It's been over 2 years since the last installment of the bus project, and in that amount of time, I've done some work and a lot of procrastinating. Most of the work I did was off camera, so let me get you caught up. I'm not going to reuse any of the windows that I took out of the bus, so I bought some used RV windows, decided where they're going to go, and framed them up here, 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 and here. I decided I'd give the bus a more streamlined look and water tightness by permanently removing all the rub bars I removed from the side of the bus early on. All these rub bars were attached via screws, so permanently removing them meant screw hole patching. A metric ton of screw hole patching. How did I patch all of these screw holes? I used a metal hole punch to punch out millions of little plugs. These plugs came out slightly conical, so I flattened them with a hammer. Then I very lightly tack welded them in place with the MIG welder, holding them in place with a magnet. The grinder was then employed to remove the excess weld. The grinder left the metal slightly dipped, so I filled in those dips with Bondo and sanded everything flush. There were hundreds of screw holes to be patched on these panels, and I did that tedious process for every single one of them. And the Bondo leveling part of that process I had to do repeatedly because I'm not very good. I worked on this in the background when I had some free time, and it took me several weeks just for these couple of panels. And once all that tedious process was done, I had to take these panels off to grind off the excess weld on the back of all those screw hole patches, rust-proof them, and that leads me to now. Since lifting these panels into place is so difficult, I'm using pulleys and lifting them into place. And I can tie the rope around the wheel lug here. Then with it suspended roughly in place, I can temporarily attach it using Clecos. Now with this panel temporarily Clecoed into place, I can do any more paint work that I may need to do to the panel. In the case of this panel, not a heck of a lot, and I can drill out all of the screw holes for larger rivets that I'm going to be permanently attaching these panels with. I'm going to be using 1/4-inch steel rivets in the place of the screws that originally held these panels in place. There's several spaces on these panels, like right here, where the rub bar interrupted the even spacing of these screw holes. So I marked these holes using this little gauge right here that's called a divider or something. I don't actually remember the name of this. I'll have an Amazon link down in the description where you can buy one of these yourselves, because it's a very useful tool for stuff like this. With all the new hole locations marked out like that, it's time to drill them all out. There are several spots along these two panels, like all of these spots here, where in the process of grinding off the excess weld from the back of the panel, I generated too much heat and the Bondo has bubbled up. So on this entire panel, I need to grind the Bondo off and re-Bondo all of the screw hole patches. Nothing like doing your work twice. It's time to rivet the panels into place permanently. And by the way, to rivet these panels, I'm going to be using this drill-powered rivet gun, because it's not quite as fast as an air-powered rivet tool, but it's a heck of a lot more convenient because I don't have to lug around an air hose. That's it for now on this side. Now to rinse and repeat for the two panels on the other side of the bus. Previously, I've shown you this, the Anker 521 Portable Powerhouse by Anker. Oh wait, I already said Anker. I'll say it again. This video is sponsored by Anker. This nifty little thing is a portable battery box that you can use to power and or charge your various devices through the 12-volt power socket, USB-C port, 2 USB 3.0 ports, and 2 AC outlets powered by an onboard 200-watt inverter. And it has a light. I love this thing and it's come in handy in the most unexpected of places, but what if it's not enough for you? The inverter, as I said, is 200 watts, and the battery capacity is 256 watt hours. What if you need more? This is the new Anker 535 portable power station by Anker. Anker. The 535 is just like the 521, but more. Instead of 2 USB outlets, it has 3. Instead of 2 AC outlets, it has 4. Instead of 200 watts of inverter output, it has 500 watts. And instead of 256 watt hours of battery capacity, this has 512 watt hours of battery capacity. That's enough, so claims Anker's website, to power a CPAP machine for almost 10 hours. Or, long enough to actually sleep through the night. And the 535 still has all the great features from the 521, including a display that shows you the state of charge, time remaining, and wattage input and output, ultra-stable lithium iron phosphate battery chemistry, the ability to charge the battery box from either a 12-volt power outlet in your car, an AC outlet in your house, or a power outlet from the sky, otherwise known as solar panels. And this one also has a light, and it's brighter. And by the way, if you hold this light button down, it starts showing the SOS signal in Morse code. If you want to check out either of these battery boxes for yourself, there will be a link in the description below this video. I really do love these things and they really do come in handy all the time. Thanks again to Anker for sponsoring this video. I like these things. Hang on, there's been a change of plans. I already showed you how I did all the hole punch filling, but what I didn't tell you is that's the method I used for the panels on the other side of the bus. For the panels on this side of the bus, I used a much quicker method at the time. What I did was, instead of mucking about with all those fancy little hole punch dropouts, what I did was I took the MIG welder gun, pointed it at all the holes, pulled the trigger. I just pumped the holes full of plug weld, which pumped the holes full of metal, and also pumped the panels full of heat. So now all of these panels where I did that method, which is both the panels on this side of the bus, are wavier than, well, they're wavier than this fool over here. Now I know what you're thinking, why don't you flatten those panels out with Bondo? But that's what I've been trying. I have Bondoed and sanded back both of these panels on this side of the bus at least a dozen times, probably more. And the conclusion I've come to is they cannot be flattened with Bondo unless I want 2/3 of the thickness of these panels to be made of Bondo. So, since I've irreparably damaged these two panels, and to be clear, it's more than just a bit of waviness, there's several sections on this front panel here that have full-on potato chipped, I'm not going to continue with these panels at all. In fact, I'm going to get rid of them and throw them away. And for symmetry, I'm also going to dismount and throw away these two panels on this side of the bus, which is kind of a shame because the hole patching on these two panels turned out pretty alright. And I'm replacing all of this sheet metal that I took off with brand new sheet steel panels, top to bottom, on both sides of the bus. It's a shame I have to remove all of this work. Well, I don't have to, I'm just choosing to, but at least I'm starting with a brand new clean slate. The old panels have a stiffening lip on the bottom edge, but I'm going to stiffen the bottom edge of the new panels by instead adding an angle iron frame behind them. The edges of these roof panels, they don't line up, which was fine before because there was a big old gutter rail to hide all the crimes. But I don't plan to put that gutter rail back, at least for now anyway. So I'm going to trim off all of these roof panel edges so that they line up. If I do put that gutter rail back, this will be a waste of time. Hi! I just lost 2 weeks of work because I was sick. Although I procrastinated on this project for 2 years, so what's another couple of weeks? Anyway, now I need to do the thing that I've been avoiding. This curved corner piece here for the back of the living quarters of the bus, I need to fabricate some new sheet metal panels to extend this downward to the bottom of where the sheet metal panels are going to mount to. And to accomplish this task, yesterday I went out and bought a slip roller and a bench brake, both of which I've never used before. I mean, that's not horrific. It's not great either. I clearly have a long way to go before this is actually a replica of this. That is much better. Now all I have to do is repeat it 5 more times. There! Now I need to join these short sections together into long sections by spot welding them to some bits of angle. Here's the new curved panel clamped in place, and it looks awful. It already didn't look very good because my slip roller is very small, so I had to slip roll these in individual sections, and they're not consistent with one another, so the seams didn't line up very well. But then I made it worse by trying to weld the seams together. Welding the very thin sheet metal just about ruined it. So given how unhappy I was with this piece, I made another one. Here it is, and it is marginally better. I just about poked myself in the eye. It is marginally better, so I'm going to use this instead. And then tons of Bondo. After days worth of Bondo and sanding, lots of sanding, this panel still isn't perfect, but it's good enough that I feel comfortable moving on to mounting the new sheet metal panels. The panels I got are 20 gauge thick, that's something in millimeters, raw steel panels. They came in sizes of 4 by 10 sheets. I had them cut them down to 88 inches, and I'm going to mount 4 panels on each side of the bus, orientated vertically, stitched together, slightly overlapped with rivets, and mounted to the bus with more rivets. However, the area that I have to cover on both sides of the bus, front to back, is just over 16 feet. As I just said, each one of these panels I'm installing is 4 feet wide, and they're going to overlap slightly. So with 4 panels, I don't have enough to cover both sides of the bus. That's why in this gap from here to here, I'm going to be paneling it with the offcuts from the big sheet, 2 of them stitched together vertically right about here. And that's where I'm going to start. You like this bus project? Why not tell the world about it by buying this shirt that says, "I like bus stuff"? But if you're thinking, hey, that doesn't look like your bus doesn't have a back on it. You're right, that's why I made a second version of the shirt that says, "I like bus stuff, bareback." So if you want to pick up either one of these shirts and tell the world how much you like bus stuff and simultaneously support me and the projects that I work on, you can do so at the link in the description, where you can find a link to the new Aging Wheels crowd-made store. You can pick up these 2 Bus Stuff shirts or any other Aging Wheels merchandise. But you better hurry, because the Bus Stuff shirts will only be available for 30 days. Now I need to stitch these 2 panels together, which, as I said, I'm going to be doing using rivets, which means I need a series of evenly spaced holes on both panels that line up perfectly. This is the hole punch you briefly saw me use earlier. I wanted to use this to make a series of evenly spaced holes, so I made up this little fence for it, just some bits of flat bar welded together with this little piece here, and I turned down this little pin on the lathe that goes in here. So I can use this to punch a hole, then I can move the head over and place this pin in this little spot in the fence there, in the hole that I just punched, punch another hole, and then go on down the line until I have a series of evenly spaced holes. Unfortunately, this doesn't work very well. The problem is this fence only has one place to attach, right here, and it wiggles just a little bit. That means there's a little bit of error, and the space between the holes isn't super even like I need it to be. And because each hole references the last, that means the error compounds as I go down the line. So if I do this between 2 different panels, the holes don't line up like they should. So I went out and bought this. It's an air-powered hole punch, which obviously will be easier to use, but the main reason I wanted this thing is because the head on it is perfectly rectangular and therefore very jiggable. So I put my Stepcraft CNC router to work, and I had it make these, a series of jigs for that pneumatic hole punch that link together with box joints. So I can clamp my jig to my sheet metal, lining up the edges on all the sides, and then hole punch away. And voila, evenly spaced holes. And that's how I'm going to cut the holes to stitch the panels together. As you can see, these rivet holes line up perfectly, which makes me very happy. I've got these 2 skinny panels temporarily clecoed into place, and now I need to start thinking about order of operations, because before I can permanently mount these panels with rivets, I need to clean them and prime them, you know, so they don't rust. But before I can do that, I need to drill all of the rivet holes that I'm going to be using to mount these panels, because there's no sense of priming them and then immediately exposing fresh steel. As you can see, I've already drilled all the rivet holes on this side of the panel, but I haven't drilled any rivet holes on this side of the panel because the next panel is going to overlap this one, and the rivets are going to go through both panels and the strut behind them. So before I can take these panels off to clean them and prime them, I need to put up the next panel in place, drill all these rivet holes, see where the rivet holes are going to go, and have the rivet holes drilled so that I can prime these panels, and so on down the line. For cleaning and priming, I wanted a way to hold the panels in place that didn't cover up the front face or any of the edges of the panels. So this is what I came up with. A wood with 2 rectangles of weather stripping stapled to the front of it, and in the middle of those rectangles, some holes. And on the back side of those holes is some plumbing, so I can connect those holes to my fancy German vacuum. I've got my dust extricator on a remote, so I can just turn it on. Hold the panels up in place. And now the panels are being held up by the power of the atmosphere. Now I can deburr all the rivet holes, clean off all the anti-corrosion oil with acetone, then flip the panels over and do it all again. A problem has popped up. The seam between these individual pieces of slip-rolled sheet metal is cracking through the Bondo. Here it's even pushing the Bondo out, a rather big chip of it, which is a problem. Now I probably should have seen this coming, but I didn't. Now I really don't want to remove this whole corner panel because it's firmly welded in place. So what I'm going to try to do to save this panel is grind off all the Bondo and paint around the seams, turn the MIG welder all the way down to 9 volt and very lightly stitch weld the sheet metal panels together so they don't move independently anymore, and hopefully the Bondo won't crack. Hopefully that'll work. Otherwise I'm going to have to rip this panel out, which again, I don't want to do. The stitch weld fix totally worked, thankfully. The panel looks good, and now I know for the other side I need to weld the seams together. Time for primer, and to help me do that I've set up this temporary paint booth in my shop. Also, there's geese in here now. Don't worry about that part. Goose, goose. These 2 small panels aren't quite ready to be mounted just yet, but I already have the first set of rivet holes drilled for the next panel, so I can go ahead and put that back in place, drill and punch out all the rest of the rivet holes for that panel, and then put the next panel in place, drill and punch all those rivet holes, the next panel on down the line, and then I can come back one by one and clean and prime each panel until this whole side is done. No, I'm not going to make the wheel arch out of a thin piece of OSB. This is a template for the 4th State of Matter gun. My painting setup isn't working. This is my vacuum clamping board, and I've already dismantled it because of a couple pretty major flaws. The first is, with a panel stuck to this thing, I can only paint one side of the panel at a time, which of course I saw coming, and I didn't think it would be a problem because I thought the dry time on my epoxy primer was 30 minutes, which to be fair, it is, if the ambient temperature is 140 degrees Fahrenheit, but at room temperature the dry time is well over 4 hours. So with this setup, the maximum number of panels I can paint in a day is 1. Not to mention, the panels that I'm trying to stick to this thing, I didn't think about this, are full of rivet holes, so a lot of them, you know, wouldn't stick to the vacuum clamping board. So I dismantled this, I dismantled the temporary paint booth I set up around it, and I replaced it with this much bigger Kilroot paint booth, and I can hang 2 panels in here, and to paint them, I'm going to be hanging them from the ceiling, which presented a new problem. How do I get the panels up there? So to do that, I threw together this stand thing out of some construction lumber, and while it's leaning on this stand, I can hook it from the ceiling, assuming the chain I cut isn't too short. Which it is. I made this stand hinged in the middle so I can just unclamp it, and the stand can just sort of fall away and let the panel hang from the ceiling. Like that. Went a lot less smoothly last time. And with the panels hanging from some chain, I can go ahead and spray on the epoxy primer 2 sides at a time. If you're curious, this is the spray gun I'm using. It's the Harbor Freight Special. It cost me about 25 bucks plus the moisture filter and the pressure regulator, and it works just fine. First couple times I used it, it didn't atomize very well because I had the pressure turned down too low, but after I figured that out, it worked just fine, and I'm getting better at painting. My panels have fewer and fewer runs in them, which is good. This is the epoxy primer that I'm using. It's Raptor or something. Works just fine, although it's weirdly glossy considering what I was expecting from a primer. And these two suction-y grab handles here that I've been moving the panels around with are called Grabos, and they're absolutely fantastic. I'll have a link down in the description if you want to check these out for yourself. I highly recommend them, although I will warn you they're quite expensive. Very worth it, but they're quite expensive. The paint work is done, the prep work is done, all the panels are primed. One of my overhead lights went out. That last one's not related to anything. It's time to start mounting panels permanently. I know I already said that once, but this time for real, permanently. I'll be doing the vast majority of the mounting using stainless steel rivets like this one here. I'll be using 3/16" rivets for the skirt frame and any of the panel seams, 1/4" rivets everywhere else. And any areas of structure that'll be touching the panel but have no rivets going through them, like right here, I'll be mounting the panels with VHB tape, and anywhere that's applicable, I'll be applying seam sealer. Some places it'll be easier to apply the seam sealer before or as I'm mounting the panel rather than afterward. First rivet of the first panel. And yes, I am using an air riveter now. What? This catch bin is useless. What a piece of junk. With all the rivets riveted, all that's left to complete this side is to cut off this thing, add seam sealer to all the seams and the rivet heads, yes, every single rivet, and finally add the windows. To get a template for the window shape, I disassembled one of the windows and stuck this piece of crap to it. Then I trimmed it to shape with the flush trim bit at the router table. Now I can trace the outline and cut out the window hole with what is either the world's least ergonomic saw or the world's most useful mosquito. To attach the windows, I'm just using sheet metal screws in countersunk holes I drilled around the window frames. This wheel arch is ready to be mounted up here. I've got all the rivet holes drilled and everything, but I'm not going to mount it just yet. I'd like to paint the bus first, because it'd be a lot easier to paint the bus with this wheel arch not in the way, and to paint this wheel arch separately. I might change my mind on that, but at the very least, I want to sandblast this piece first. Does it still start? It makes noises. Go! Oh. All right, let's try that again. Yeah! It's done! That's not true. The video's done! What I had originally intended to get done in this part of the project was both sides, the windows, the back, and the roof. I only got 1/4 of that done because I dramatically underestimated how long all this stuff would take. But the 1/4 that I got done, I'm really happy with, especially that curved corner panel back there. It looks like one continuous flowing panel, and it most certainly is not. We'll have to see what it looks like with glossy paint applied to it, but right now, I'm super happy with how it turned out. I got a lot of work ahead of me still on this bus, but I'll get it done slowly, piece by piece. And I promise the next project update won't be 2 years from now. Maybe it'll be 3. No, I'm kidding. It'll probably be about 2 months or so. I'm going to work on a couple other things and then come back to this. And the next thing I'm going to work on is the other side of the bus, which is fairly substantially different from this side, unfortunately, so it's not just going to be rinse and repeat. And that's it. Thank you for watching, and as always, special thanks to my patrons, without whose support I couldn't disappear from the internet for 2 months to work on a bus. And to my top tier patrons, I've got something special that's going to be shipped to you in the mail sometime between now and the release of the next bus project video. All of the windows that I took out of the bus, I'm cutting them up and turning them into little personalized engraved plaques. Like I said, those will ship out to you, my top tier patrons, sometime between now and the release of the next bus video. But don't worry, if you're not one of my top tier patrons and you still want one of these personalized engraved plaques, I will be listing them for sale come the release of the next bus project video. Honestly, that was the plan for this project video, but things didn't come together in time, so it'll be for the next project video. I had quite a few technical difficulties getting those plaques engraved and cut up and everything. So anyway, until next time, I'll see you later. I destroyed the yard driving the bus over here. I hate myself so much right now. Look what I just did. Look at that, just rounding the corner around the Durango here. Look at that, on my brand new panel. Ah!